chosen ones. There's a conversation happening right now that you know nothing about. A room full of powerful people seated around a table, their faces grave with the weight of what they're discussing. They're talking about you, not because you've done something wrong, but because they realize they got everything catastrophically wrong about you. These aren't just any people. These are the ones who hold influence, who make decisions that ripple through systems and institutions. And at this very moment, they're scrambling to figure out how to clean up the mess they made when they tried to bury you alive. Let me tell you what's really happening here. Someone close to you, someone you once trusted with pieces of your heart, conspired to destroy your life. Not just damage it, destroy it. They wanted you gone, erased, blamed for things you had nothing to do with. And for a time it looked like they might succeed. Evidence was manufactured, stories were twisted, your name was dragged through shadows you never walked in. But here's what they didn't count on. You're still standing, not just surviving, but thriving in ways that have left these powerful people absolutely stunned. And now they're having urgent conversations about how to make things right before the truth becomes too loud to contain. This isn't about forgiveness or apologies. This is about something far more profound. Divine protection operating at levels that defy human understanding. The first thing you need to understand is that what happened to you was never random. Someone plotted this with precision and malice. A romantic partner or ex-partner, someone who once whispered promises in your ear, sat down and calculated how to frame you for their own crimes. They had help too. A family member, possibly a sibling who shares enough physical resemblance to you that under the right circumstances, in the right wig with the right angles, they could pass as you in photographs or surveillance footage. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was premeditated character assassination, designed to send you to prison while they walked free. They took out a life insurance policy on you. The number keeps echoing in the spiritual realm. 200,000. That's what your life was worth to them in cold calculation. They didn't just want you discredited. They wanted you dead, and they wanted to profit from it. Let that sink in for a moment. Someone who claimed to love you sat down and assigned a dollar amount to your elimination. They filed paperwork, they made plans, they recruited accomplices, and then they set events in motion that should have ended with you in a grave or behind bars. But here's where their plans started crumbling. You moved away from these people before they could complete their design. Your intuition, that voice inside that whispers warnings when danger approaches, told you something was wrong. You couldn't articulate it fully at the time. You just knew you needed distance, you needed separation. So you created it. You pulled back from relationships that felt toxic, chaotic, reckless. You chose peace over drama. You chose your own well-being over trying to fix broken people who had no intention of healing. And that choice, that seemingly simple decision to protect your energy, saved your life. While you were building your new reality, living your life, focusing on growth and genuine progress, they were out there creating false evidence, surveillance footage that wasn't you, financial transactions traced to accounts you never opened, testimonies from people claiming they saw you in places you've never been. They built an entire false narrative, layering lie upon lie, assuming that sheer volume would overwhelm truth. They assumed that once the authorities started looking your direction, the momentum would be unstoppable. They assumed wrong. The investigation that was launched without your knowledge started turning up inconsistencies almost immediately, phone records that didn't match, alibis that held up under scrutiny, physical evidence that pointed away from you rather than toward you. Every thread they thought they'd woven into a noose unraveled when pulled. But here's what's truly remarkable. The investigators didn't just find you innocent, they found you were the victim. Everything that was supposed to prove your guilt actually exposed the conspiracy against you. The very evidence manufactured to condemn you became the proof of your persecution. Now these people in positions of authority are looking at a nightmare scenario. They acted on bad information. They pursued someone who was innocent while the real perpetrators walked free. They allowed bias, assumptions based on rumors and manufactured evidence to guide their actions, and now they're facing the possibility of lawsuits, public exposure, the complete destruction of their credibility and careers because they didn't do their jobs properly. They didn't investigate thoroughly. They didn't question the narrative being fed to them. They simply accepted what appeared to be substantial evidence without digging deeper to verify authenticity. So here's what's happening in that room right now. They're discussing settlements, out-of-court agreements, non-disclosure arrangements. They're talking about how to make this go away quietly before it explodes into public scandal. They're debating who approaches you and with what offer. They're calculating minimum payouts versus maximum liability. They're reviewing every step of what went wrong and how badly this could damage their organization if it reaches trial. They're not motivated by justice or genuine remorse. They're motivated by self-preservation and damage control. But let's talk about what they're also discussing, the part that has them genuinely disturbed. They're impressed by you. Genuinely, deeply impressed. Because while all this was happening in the shadows, while accusations were being whispered and investigations were being conducted without your awareness, you kept moving forward, you kept building, you kept succeeding. Despite the weight of false accusations hanging over you like invisible chains, you achieved things that should have been impossible under that pressure. You advanced in your career, you launched projects, you maintained your peace, you showed up in the world with confidence and purpose. They're looking at recordings of your communications, monitoring that was done supposedly for investigative purposes, and they're finding nothing incriminating, just someone living their life with integrity. Just someone working hard, treating people well, staying focused on legitimate goals. No hidden conspiracies, no secret dealings, just a person being exactly who they appeared to be, honest, hard-working, innocent. This is where the meeting gets really interesting, because now they're not just trying to avoid liability, they're trying to figure out how to turn this into an opportunity, how to bring you into their fold, how to offer you something valuable enough that you'll accept their terms and move forward without pursuing the justice you absolutely deserve. They're preparing offers that will sound generous on the surface, a job opportunity, funding for a business venture, connections to influential networks, products, platforms, visibility. They're going to frame these as goodwill gestures, opportunities extended because they recognize your talent and potential. But make no mistake about what's really happening. They're trying to buy your silence. They're trying to control the narrative before you can. They're trying to turn you from a victim seeking justice into a beneficiary of their generosity. They'll never call it an apology, because an apology admits wrongdoing, and admitting wrongdoing opens them to legal consequences they desperately want to avoid. So instead they'll offer opportunity, disguised as recognition. They'll praise your resilience, while hoping you never publicly examine why you needed to be resilient in the first place. Now here's where you need to pay very close attention. Within the next 7 to 10 days, someone is going to reach out to you. It might be direct or through an intermediary. It might come as a business opportunity or a casual conversation that slowly reveals its true purpose. They're going to test the waters, gauge your awareness of what's been happening behind the scenes, assess how much you know and what you might demand. They'll be polite, professional, careful with their words. They'll make offers that sound appealing, that might genuinely improve certain aspects of your life, and you'll need to decide how to respond. Not from anger, though anger would be completely justified. Not from desperation, even if you've been struggling financially or professionally, but from power, because that's what you actually hold right now, even if you don't fully realize it yet. You hold the power to expose corruption, to demand accountability, to reject their attempts at cheap resolution. You hold the truth, and truth backed by evidence is the most powerful weapon in any conflict. If this message hits your spirit, hype this video so more chosen ones like you can find it. They know this. That's why they're scrambling. That's why the conversation is happening with such urgency. They know that if you decide to pursue this fully, to bring everything into the light, their carefully constructed reputations crumble, their institutions face scrutiny, their careers end in scandal. They're hoping you don't understand your own leverage. They're hoping you'll be grateful for whatever scraps they offer and quietly accept their terms. But you're not who they think you are. You never were. That's why their entire plan collapsed from the beginning. They built their conspiracy on a fundamental misunderstanding of your character. They assumed you were like them, willing to cut corners, compromise integrity, participate in schemes if the price was right. They assumed you could be the villain in their story because they themselves operate from such deeply corrupted values that they can't imagine someone genuinely living differently. They looked at your life and projected their own shadows onto it. When they saw your success, they assumed it came from the same dark dealings that fuel their own advancement. When they saw your confidence, they assumed it came from hidden wrongdoing that made you untouchable. They couldn't comprehend that someone might simply work hard, stay honest and trust in divine timing. That worldview doesn't compute for people who've compromised their souls for temporary gains. So they created a version of you that matched their understanding of how the world works. They wrote you into their narrative as a fellow traveler on dark paths, someone who would naturally be involved in insurance fraud, criminal conspiracies, calculated violence. And when reality refused to cooperate with their fiction, when every investigation found you clean, they were genuinely shocked. Not because you're so extraordinary, but because their moral compass is so broken they can't recognize basic integrity when they encounter it. This is actually what has them most impressed, not your achievements, though those are notable, not your resilience, though that's undeniable. What has them truly stunned is the realization that you've been operating from a completely different value system all along. You've been playing an entirely different game while they assumed you were just better at hiding your moves in the same corrupt game they're playing. The discovery that you weren't playing their game at all, that you were building something real and legitimate while they were scheming and manipulating, has forced them to see you in a completely new light. And here's the spiritual truth underlying all of this. You were protected because you're meant for something they can't touch. There's a divine plan operating in your life that supersedes human schemes. Every time they thought they had you cornered, circumstances shifted in ways that can't be explained by luck or coincidence. Evidence appeared that cleared you. Witnesses came forward unexpectedly. Technology revealed truths that should have stayed hidden. Timing worked in your favor again and again in ways that defy probability. You felt this protection even when you couldn't name it. There were moments when you should have been at a certain place at a certain time, but something delayed you. Phone calls that prevented you from walking into traps. Sudden illnesses that kept you home on days when danger was waiting. Intuitive hits that made you change plans at the last minute. These weren't random occurrences. This was divine intervention operating through the fabric of your daily life, redirecting your steps, closing doors that looked inviting but led to destruction, opening paths you didn't even know existed. The people in that room, the ones having urgent conversations about how to handle you, they sense this even if they don't have language for it. They feel the weight of something beyond their control operating in your favor. It makes them nervous because they're used to being able to manipulate outcomes, to leverage power and influence, to shape reality according to their desires. But with you, nothing works the way it should. Their carefully laid plans collapse. Their manufactured evidence falls apart. Their conspiracies expose themselves, and they're left scrambling to contain the damage while you continue moving forward as if their schemes never existed. Because in the truest sense, their schemes don't exist in your reality. They exist in the shadow realm, where corruption breeds more corruption, where people sacrifice each other for profit and power, where souls are traded for temporary advantage. You don't live in that realm. You never have. You walk in the light, and light has a way of making shadows disappear simply by existing. You don't have to fight darkness directly. You just have to keep being who you are, keep operating from integrity, keep trusting that truth eventually surfaces and justice eventually arrives. Now let's address the specific people who orchestrated this attack against you. The narcissistic romantic partner or ex-partner who sits at the center of this web. This person is driven by an insatiable need for recognition, status, validation from external sources. They measure their worth by how much attention they receive, how much power they appear to hold, how they're perceived by others. And when you stopped feeding their endless hunger for validation, when you recognized the toxicity and stepped back, they experienced it as a mortal wound to their ego. Narcissists can't tolerate being left behind. They can't accept that someone chose peace over their drama, chose self-respect over their manipulation, so they retaliate. Not openly, because that would risk their carefully curated public image, but through covert schemes designed to destroy you while maintaining their facade of innocence. They recruit others into their campaign, spinning stories that cast them as the victim of your wrongdoing, building sympathy and support from people who don't know they're being used as weapons in someone else's vendetta. This person enabled or directly participated in having a family member, likely a sibling, engage in activities designed to be mistaken for your involvement. Surveillance footage, witness accounts, digital trails, all carefully constructed to place you at scenes of crimes you never committed. They knew enough about your life, your patterns, your appearance to create a convincing false trail. They used intimate knowledge gained during your relationship as ammunition against you after it ended. They weaponized your trust. And they did all of this while maintaining relationships with people who still see them as charming, successful, admirable. That's the most disturbing aspect of narcissistic predators. They're often highly functional in public spheres. They can be charismatic, accomplished, seemingly generous and supportive. The mask only slips in private, with people they feel safe enough to abuse. Everyone else sees the performance and can't imagine the cruelty happening behind closed doors. So when victims speak up, they're often disbelieved because the abuser has already built a social fortress of credibility. But masks crack under sustained pressure, and the pressure is building now, because investigations have a way of uncovering more than the specific crime being examined. When authorities start pulling threads, entire tapestries of deception unravel, financial irregularities surface, patterns of behavior emerge, other victims find courage to come forward. What began as an investigation into one incident expands into a much larger examination of someone's entire operation, and that's what's happening here. The spotlight that was supposed to destroy you is now turning toward its real target. Your ex-partner is realizing they can't control this anymore. They thought they could frame you, cash in on your life insurance and walk away clean. But divine justice doesn't operate on human timelines or according to human understanding of how things should work. Sometimes justice arrives exactly when the perpetrator feels safest, exactly when they think they've gotten away with everything. The hammer falls when they least expect it, and it falls with the accumulated weight of every evil action they thought went unnoticed. And the family member who participated in this scheme, who was willing to impersonate you, to engage in activities designed to destroy your reputation and possibly your life, they're facing their own reckoning. Accomplices often break first under pressure. They don't have the same narcissistic armor as the primary manipulator. They feel guilt, fear, the weight of consequences approaching. They start to see that loyalty to a toxic person is about to cost them everything. And when investigators apply pressure, when they're offered deals in exchange for testimony, accomplices frequently turn on each other. This is why the meeting is happening with such urgency. The people in positions of authority know that this situation is unstable. They know that any day now someone involved in the conspiracy against you might decide to save themselves by revealing everything. They know that the longer this drags on, the more likely it is that truth emerges in ways they can't control. So they want to lock you into an agreement now, before you fully understand the extent of what was done to you, before you realize how much leverage you actually have. They're going to come with offers that sound significant, financial compensation that seems generous until you consider what you've been through and what you're entitled to. Career opportunities that sound impressive until you realize they're designed to keep you dependent on the same system that failed you. Non-disclosure agreements framed as protecting your privacy when they're really protecting the institution's reputation. They'll use language about moving forward and not dwelling on the past and taking the high road, all coded phrases designed to make you feel like seeking full justice is somehow petty or vindictive. But here's what you need to understand at the deepest level. You don't owe these people anything. Not your silence, not your forgiveness, not your cooperation in their damage control. They failed you catastrophically. They allowed bias and laziness to guide their investigation. They caused you harm through their incompetence and unwillingness to challenge a false narrative. And now they want you to make their lives easier by accepting whatever they offer and disappearing quietly. You have every right to demand full accountability. You have every right to insist on public acknowledgement of what happened. You have every right to pursue every legal avenue available to you for compensation and justice. You have every right to tell your story loudly and clearly so that others can learn from your experience. You have every right to refuse any offer that requires your silence or complicity in covering up institutional failure. But you also have the right to choose peace over prolonged conflict. You have the right to accept a settlement if you determine it genuinely serves your interests and allows you to move forward without carrying the weight of an extended legal battle. You have the right to decide that some doors are better closed than forced open, that some fights aren't worth the energy they require, that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well while your enemies collapse under the weight of their own corruption. Whatever you decide, decide from a place of power rather than reaction. Don't let anger drive you into decisions you'll later regret. Don't let fear of conflict make you accept less than you deserve. Don't let their urgency pressure you into commitments before you've had time to fully understand the situation and consider your options. Take your time. Consult with people who have your genuine best interests at heart. Seek legal counsel from attorneys who specialize in cases like this. Pray or meditate or sit in silence until you feel clear about the path forward. Because here's the ultimate truth that transcends all the practical considerations. You've already won. The victory happened the moment their conspiracy collapsed. The victory happened every day you kept living your life with integrity while they lived in fear of exposure. The victory happened when divine protection surrounded you so completely that their weapons couldn't touch you. Everything from this point forward is just choosing how you want to express that victory in the physical realm. They wanted you erased. You're more visible than ever. They wanted you destroyed. You're stronger than you've ever been. They wanted you imprisoned. You're walking in more freedom than they'll ever know because your conscience is clear and theirs never will be. They wanted to profit from your death. Instead, they're about to pay for their crimes. That's not luck. That's not coincidence. That's divine justice operating exactly as it should, restoring balance, ensuring that what was meant for evil gets transformed into your testimony of protection and ultimate vindication. So when they come with their offers, and they will come soon, remember who you are. Remember that you survived something designed to kill you. Remember that you thrived under pressure that should have crushed you. Remember that you're standing in your truth while they're scrambling to cover their lies. Remember that you have angels, ancestors, divine forces operating on your behalf in ways you can't fully see but can absolutely trust. Remember that you're a chosen one, and chosen ones don't just survive attacks, they transform those attacks into testimonies that inspire others, into lessons that elevate consciousness, into proof that light always, eventually, definitively overcomes darkness. The conversation happening in that room right now is about damage control and self-preservation. But the conversation that matters is the one happening in the spiritual realm where your victory is already complete, where justice is already rendered, where your enemies have already fallen and they just don't know it yet. Stay aligned with that higher conversation. Stay rooted in the truth of who you are and whose you are. Stay confident in the protection that has carried you this far and will continue carrying you forward. And when you're ready, when the time is right, step into the fullness of this moment. not as a victim seeking scraps, not as someone grateful for whatever acknowledgement they're willing to give, but as a victor claiming what's rightfully yours, as someone who walked through fire and emerged not just unburned but refined, purified, elevated, as a chosen one who knows beyond doubt that you're guided, protected, destined for greatness that no human conspiracy can prevent. They're impressed by how you succeeded after everything they put you through. Let that impression deepen into awe. Let them see that what they mistook for luck was actually divine favor. Let them understand that the person they tried to destroy was always beyond their reach, operating in a realm they can't access, protected by forces they can't comprehend. Let your continued success be the loudest testimony to the futility of fighting against someone heaven has marked for elevation. You didn't just survive the dreadful conspiracy against you, you transcended it completely. And that transcendence, that absolute refusal to be diminished by their darkness, is what has them sitting in urgent meetings, trying to figure out how to deal with you. Because you're no longer someone they can manipulate or control. You're someone they have to reckon with, someone they have to answer to, someone they have to acknowledge, despite every instinct they have to deny and minimize and deflect. So, chosen one, prepare yourself. The next phase is beginning. The conversation is about to move from their boardrooms into your presence, and when it does, you'll be ready. Not because you have all the answers yet, but because you've been preparing for this moment through every challenge you've overcome, every false accusation you've survived, every step forward you've taken, despite everything working against you. You've been in training, and the training is complete. Now comes the demonstration of everything you've learned, everything you've become, everything you were always meant to be. Walk into this next chapter with your head high and your spirit clear. The powerful people are watching, and they're about to discover that impressing them was never your goal. Honoring your truth, protecting your peace, claiming your divine inheritance, that's what drives you, and that's what makes you untouchable, unstoppable, absolutely inevitable in your rising. The truth about what happened to you runs even deeper than what's been revealed so far. While you were living your life completely unaware of the machinery working against you in the shadows, there were recordings being made, phone calls monitored, mail being tracked, digital footprints being analyzed. Someone authorized surveillance on you based on manufactured suspicions, and for weeks or maybe months, your private communications were being scrutinized by people looking for evidence of crimes you never committed. Imagine that violation for a moment. People you've never met, sitting in offices you've never seen, listening to your conversations with friends and family, reading your messages, building profiles of your behavior, all while operating under the assumption that you were guilty of something terrible. And what did they find in all that invasive monitoring? Absolutely nothing. Just a person living honestly, working hard, caring for loved ones, navigating ordinary challenges with integrity. The very investigation meant to condemn you became the strongest proof of your innocence. This is why the people in that meeting are so disturbed, because the depth of their error is now undeniable. They didn't just make a small mistake or follow a questionable lead. They authorized significant resources, violated your privacy, pursued you as a criminal, all based on evidence that wouldn't hold up under basic scrutiny. Someone should have questioned the narrative earlier. Someone should have noticed the inconsistencies before things went this far. Someone should have protected you instead of targeting you. But they didn't, and now they're sitting with the reality that they persecuted an innocent person, while the real criminals were laughing at how easily they'd manipulated the system. That kind of institutional failure doesn't just embarrass the people involved, it destroys careers, triggers investigations into the investigators, creates liability that can cost millions in settlements and reforms. What makes this even more complex is the sophistication of the scheme against you. This wasn't amateur hour. Whoever planned this understood how investigations work, what kind of evidence carries weight, how to create a trail that would lead authorities in your direction while obscuring their own involvement. They knew about digital forensics, about how to manipulate timestamps and locations. They understood the psychology of investigators, how confirmation bias works, how once someone is identified as a suspect, the tendency is to interpret everything through that lens. They were counting on the system's flaws, on laziness and assumption, and the path of least resistance. And for a while it worked exactly as they planned. You were being built into a case without even knowing a case existed. But here's what they couldn't account for. Your life was too clean, your patterns too consistent, your character too established. When investigators actually looked beyond the manufactured evidence and examined your real history, your actual behavior, your genuine relationships, everything pointed away from the crimes you were supposedly involved in. Co-workers spoke about your reliability and honesty. Neighbors mentioned your quiet, drama-free lifestyle. Financial records showed straightforward income and spending with no hidden accounts or suspicious transactions. Medical records, work schedules, everything created a picture of someone who simply wasn't living the double life the accusations required. The frame didn't fit because you were never the shape they tried to force you into. And then something shifted in the investigation. Someone, maybe a detective with better instincts than the others, maybe a supervisor reviewing the case with fresh eyes, started asking different questions. If this person is supposed to be involved in criminal activity, where's the motive? Where's the history that would lead to this kind of escalation? Where are the connections to the other people supposedly involved? And when those questions started being asked seriously, the entire narrative fell apart like a house of cards in a strong wind. Because there was no motive. There was no history. There were no real connections. There was just manufactured evidence pointing at someone who had the misfortune of being targeted by people skilled in deception. That's when the investigation turned. That's when it stopped being about proving your guilt and started being about understanding how such a massive miscarriage of justice nearly occurred. That's when your name went from suspect to victim in the official files. And that's when panic set in for everyone involved, both the conspirators who framed you and the authorities who nearly sent an innocent person to prison. Because now there are questions about how this happened, who authorized what, who failed to do their due diligence, who allowed bias to override proper procedure. There are going to be internal reviews, possibly external audits, definitely legal exposure for multiple parties. And all of it could have been avoided if someone had simply done their job correctly from the beginning. The family member who participated in impersonating you is particularly vulnerable now. They're not a hardened criminal with experience evading consequences. They're someone who got pulled into a toxic plan, probably through manipulation by the narcissistic ex-partner who orchestrated everything. Maybe they were promised money. Maybe they were convinced you deserved it somehow. Maybe they were just weak-willed and easily influenced. Whatever their reasoning, they're now facing serious criminal charges, and they know it. Conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, possibly attempted murder, depending on what the ultimate goal was. These aren't minor offenses with community service and probation. These are prison sentences measured in years, maybe decades. And when someone is facing that kind of time, they start thinking very seriously about cooperation deals. Law enforcement knows this. Prosecutors know this. That's why there's such urgency in trying to resolve things with you quickly and quietly. Because if this goes to trial, if prosecutors start offering reduced sentences in exchange for testimony, the whole conspiracy unravels publicly. Court proceedings are matters of public record. Media gets interested in stories about innocent people nearly destroyed by elaborate schemes. Your name, which they tried to destroy in shadows, would be cleared in sunlight, and everyone who participated in targeting you would be exposed. The narcissistic ex-partner who thought they were so clever would become the face of betrayal and evil. The family member would become a cautionary tale about the cost of loyalty to toxic people, and the institution that failed to protect you would become a symbol of systemic incompetence. Nobody in positions of power wants that outcome. They want this resolved in conference rooms, not courtrooms. They want settlements with confidentiality clauses, not verdicts with victim impact statements. They want to control the narrative about what happened, to minimize the damage, to move forward without the stain of this catastrophic failure becoming permanent record. And they're hoping you'll want the same thing, that you'll value privacy and closure over public vindication, that you'll accept financial compensation as adequate justice for what you endured. They're hoping you don't understand that the price of your silence is worth far more than whatever initial offer they present. But let's talk about what you've actually lost that can never be fully compensated. Peace of mind during the period when this was happening, even if you weren't consciously aware of the investigation. Your energy was affected. You probably felt unexplained anxiety, a sense of threat you couldn't identify, pressure that seemed to come from nowhere. That was your spirit, sensing the attack happening in realms you couldn't see. You may have experienced interrupted sleep, unusual stress, relationships strained by your mood shifts that you couldn't explain to yourself or others. That's trauma, even if you didn't know its source at the time. That's stolen wellness, stolen joy, stolen peace, and there's no dollar amount that truly restores what was taken. Then there's the violation of having been surveilled without your knowledge or consent. Even though the monitoring revealed your innocence, the fact that it happened at all is a profound breach. Your private conversations, your personal communications, your daily movements, all of it examined by strangers looking for reasons to condemn you. You can't unknow that now. You can't unfeel the invasion of having been treated as a criminal when you were actually a victim. That violation sits in your nervous system, creates mistrust that wasn't there before, makes you question who might be watching or listening, even in moments that should feel safe. That's a permanent alteration of your relationship with privacy and security. That's damage that persists long after the immediate threat has passed. And what about the opportunity cost? The energy and resources you could have directed toward dreams and goals if you hadn't been carrying the invisible weight of being targeted. You kept succeeding despite the pressure, which is remarkable, but imagine what you could have accomplished without that pressure. Imagine the projects you might have started, the risks you might have taken, the connections you might have deepened if your subconscious hadn't been in constant defensive mode. You were operating with a significant handicap, fighting battles you didn't even know you were in, and you still moved forward. But you should never have had to fight those battles in the first place. That stolen potential, that diverted energy, that's a loss that compounds over time. There's also the reputational shadow that may linger even after you're officially cleared, because rumors travel faster than corrections. Some people heard whispers about suspicions or investigations, and even when those people eventually hear that it was all false, the initial impression leaves a residue. You might notice it in how certain people interact with you, a slight distance or hesitation that wasn't there before, questions in their eyes they don't voice directly. You might face it in background checks or professional vetting where the mere fact of having been investigated regardless of outcome raises flags that require explanation. You might encounter it in your own head, wondering if people know, if they're judging, if your name will ever be fully clear of the taint they tried to attach to it. That's exhausting in ways that are hard to quantify, but impossible to ignore. The people in that urgent meeting know all of this. They know that what happened to you has tentacles reaching into every aspect of your life, creating ripples that will continue long after any settlement is signed. They know that true justice would require not just financial compensation, but public exoneration, official apologies, systemic reforms to prevent this from happening to others, and severe consequences for everyone who participated in the conspiracy. They know that if you fully understood the extent of the harm and pursued every avenue of accountability, it would consume their time, resources, and reputations for years to come. So they're hoping to get ahead of your awareness, to present their offer before you've had time to consult with advocates who would help you understand the full scope of your claims. Look, you already know the attacks weren't random, and if you're paying attention, you can feel it. Their walls are closing in. So let's talk about what we're doing about it. That's why I built Destiny Engine. It generates personalized sequences that help you rewire betrayal into transcendence, turn isolation into sacred power, and transform their downfall into your rise. We are using the Dark Elite's own weapons against them, taking their declassified consciousness technology that programmed competition and scarcity and repurposing it to serve cooperative intelligence. The beauty is, you don't even have to lift a finger. You put on the headphones, press play, and your subconscious is rewired while your enemies collapse under the weight of their own lies. This is why I created it in the beginning, so everything they did to break you becomes fuel for your purpose. The collective upgrade is underway. Start your destiny engine for $1 today and watch divine justice accelerate in your life. Link in the description. This is why the timing of their approach matters so much. They want to catch you while you're still processing, still trying to understand what happened, still possibly in shock or disbelief about the magnitude of the betrayal. People in that state often make decisions that prioritize immediate relief over long-term justice. They accept the first offer that makes the pain stop, that promises some sense of resolution, that allows them to believe the nightmare is really over. Only later, sometimes years later, do they realize they settled for a fraction of what they deserved, that they gave up their voice for far less than it was worth, that their silence enabled the same people to harm others because there were no real consequences for what they did. Don't let that be your story. Don't let the discomfort of this moment rush you into decisions you'll question later. Yes, prolonged legal battles are draining. Yes, there's something appealing about taking a settlement and moving on. Yes, part of you probably just wants this to be over so you can focus on building your future rather than prosecuting your past. All of that is valid and understandable, but make sure that whatever choice you make, you're making it from a fully informed position with clear understanding of what you're agreeing to and what you're giving up. Make sure you're choosing your path rather than accepting the path of least resistance that serves their interests more than yours. Because here's something else those powerful people in that meeting are discussing. They're talking about your influence, your platform, your voice. They've been watching you succeed, and they've noticed that people listen to you, that you have credibility and reach, that your story could inspire others or trigger larger conversations about injustice and corruption. They're aware that if you decided to speak publicly about what happened, it wouldn't just be a personal testimony, it would be a catalyst. Other victims of similar schemes might come forward. Journalists might start investigating patterns. Reform advocates might use your case as evidence for needed policy changes. Your individual experience could become a movement, and movements are much harder to control than individual settlements. So part of their calculation involves neutralizing that potential. If they can secure your agreement to confidentiality, they contain the threat. Your story stays private, known only to those directly involved and whoever you personally choose to tell. The system's failure remains internal, addressed through quiet reforms that don't require public admission of wrongdoing. The conspirators face consequences behind closed doors rather than in headlines. Everything gets managed and controlled, and the appearance of justice is maintained without the messy reality of public accountability. It's a tidy solution for everyone except you and the unknown others who might benefit from your truth being told. This is the weight you're carrying now, whether you wanted it or not. You're not just deciding your own fate. You're potentially deciding whether this pattern continues, whether these systems remain unchanged, whether future victims will have to fight the same battles you fought. That's an unfair burden to place on someone who never asked to be in this position. You didn't sign up to be an advocate or a symbol or a catalyst for change. You just wanted to live your life. But life has placed you at a crossroads where your choices ripple beyond your personal sphere, and there's no pretending that's not true. Some chosen ones are called to quiet victories, to private triumphs that bless their immediate circles without broader visibility. Other chosen ones are called to public testimony, to standing in the light and speaking truth that makes systems tremble. Neither path is better or worse, neither path is more spiritual or more brave, but each path requires different sacrifices and offers different rewards. The question you face now is which calling resonates with your spirit, which path aligns with the purpose you sense in your deepest knowing, which choice you'll be at peace with when you look back years from now. If you choose the path of settlement and privacy, you're choosing peace over platform, personal restoration over public crusade. You're saying that you've fought enough, survived enough, and now you want to channel your energy into building rather than battling. That's a completely valid choice. There's wisdom in knowing when to engage and when to withdraw, when to fight and when to let go, when to pursue every avenue of justice and when to accept that some battles cost more than they return. If this is your path, walk it without guilt or second guessing. Take whatever compensation you can negotiate, sign whatever agreements serve your interests, and redirect your focus toward the future you want to create. Your story doesn't have to be public to be powerful. Your victory doesn't have to be visible to be real. So when they come, and they will come soon, receive them as someone who knows their worth, not with arrogance but with confidence, not with aggression but with absolute clarity about your value and your leverage. Listen to their offers, ask your questions, take your time, consult your advisors, pray for guidance, and then respond from your power, from your truth, from your knowing about what serves your highest good. They're impressed by how you succeeded after everything they put you through. Now show them that their impression was just the beginning. Show them that a chosen one in full alignment with divine purpose is a force that no human scheme can diminish, no conspiracy can defeat, no meeting can contain. You are who you've always been, protected, guided, destined, unstoppable.